Imagine this: a fleet of ghost ships operating under the radar, carrying millions of barrels of oil and liquefied natural gas, untraceable, hidden, and ready to strike at the heart of the global economy. It sounds like something out of a spy novel, right? But here's the problem: it's not fiction. It's happening right now, and it's a direct threat to global security, to the international economy, and to the future stability of many nations across the world. Russia's shadow fleet, an illicit network of tankers and cargo vessels that are effectively invisible to most forms of international regulation and oversight, is on the move. And if we don't understand the implications of these operations, we're in danger of being completely blindsided by what they could mean for geopolitical stability, trade, and even our everyday lives. This is not just some simple evasion of sanctions or a smuggling operation. It's a full-scale covert war being waged beneath the surface of global commerce, and its repercussions could be far-reaching in ways we haven't even begun to fully comprehend. Welcome back to the Hot Zone. I'm Chuck Holton, and in today's episode, we're taking a deep dive into Russia's shadow fleet, a growing and increasingly sophisticated network of ships that's quietly reshaping the global oil and energy landscape. You may not have heard much about it yet, but what's happening right now on the high seas is an urgent threat, one that has the potential to change the rules of international trade and security forever. Stick around as we unpack these ships, how they operate, the dangerous tactics they're using, and the implications that this could have on all of us. Now, let's get into the heart of the matter. Russia's shadow fleet, which has emerged as a direct response to the West's sanctions and efforts to cripple Russia's oil exports. Since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Russia's oil exports have taken a massive hit due to economic sanctions. And as a result, Russia has resorted to creative methods to keep its oil flowing out to the global market. In fact, it's estimated that more than 70% of Russia's oil exports are now transported by this secretive network, which operates with increasing opacity and deception around the globe. But Russia didn't just throw together a bunch of ships to move oil. They've set up an entire system, a three-tiered approach to avoid detection and sanctions enforcement. The first tier is what's called the cleared fleet, which consists of ships that follow standard procedures, don't exhibit suspicious activity, and are relatively easy to track. The second tier, however, is where things get interesting. It's called the gray fleet. These vessels are deliberately created by shell companies, often with hidden ownership, and they frequently flag hop. That's when ships quickly switch their country of registration or jump from one nation to another to evade scrutiny and create a complex web of ownership, making it nearly impossible for authorities to trace their origins or their movements. The third tier is the most concerning one. It's the dark fleet. These ships go completely dark, turning off their tracking systems. They manipulate satellite data and sometimes even transfer their cargo in the middle of the ocean, out of sight of the world's monitoring systems. In other words, these ships are ghosts, operating outside the law without any way for most nations to track them. According to maritime analysts, there are currently over 1,000 vessels that make up Russia's shadow fleet, and they're responsible for moving an astonishing 4.1 million barrels of oil each day, a significant chunk of the country's total oil exports now. And it doesn't just stop at oil. These ships are also responsible for moving liquefied natural gas, which is another critical resource that Russia is desperately trying to maintain control of, despite international sanctions. But it's not just about moving resources. It's about evading the systems designed to keep international trade legitimate and accountable. These ships are employing increasingly sophisticated tactics to make sure that sanctions and global regulations can't touch them, using flags of convenience to further obscure their identity. It's a tactic that's been employed for years by countries looking to circumvent international law. Flags of convenience are where a ship is registered under the flag of a country that has relaxed regulations on things like inspections, crew conditions, or environmental standards. Countries like Panama, Liberia, and the Marshall Islands are popular flags of convenience because they offer an easy way for ships to operate with minimal oversight, which, when combined with flag hopping, makes it extremely difficult for authorities to track the vessels involved and enforce sanctions. Now, while Russia's shadow fleet is primarily focused on evading sanctions and continuing to profit from its oil and gas exports, the operations of these fleets go beyond simple trade evasion. The Eagle S, a tanker that was seized by Finnish authorities this year, was suspected of being involved in far more than just oil or trying to evade sanctions. It's a more sinister activity, cutting undersea cables in the Baltic Sea. This wasn't some accidental collision or navigation mishap. This was a targeted, deliberate attempt to disrupt global communications. Undersea cables are the backbone of the internet, carrying nearly 95% of the world's internet traffic, and disrupting them would cause chaos on a global scale, crippling economies, slowing down communications, and even creating massive security risks for military operations. What makes this situation even more concerning is the fact that this wasn't an isolated event. Similar acts of sabotage targeting undersea infrastructure have been reported in the region, and each one raises serious questions about the vulnerability of critical infrastructure in Europe, especially when the threat may be coming from covert Russian operations designed to weaken NATO countries and disrupt their efforts to support Ukraine. But the threat doesn't just lie in the disruption of communications. These ships are also posing risks to undersea pipelines, which carry gas and oil, especially to Europe from places like Russia and the Middle East. If these pipelines were damaged or destroyed, it could lead to catastrophic energy shortages, particularly in the middle of the harsh European winter. Now imagine cutting off the primary source of energy for millions of people in the dead of winter. It would plunge the entire European continent into crisis, destabilizing economies and creating political chaos. That's what Russia does. The idea that these shadow fleet vessels could be involved in such operations isn't any longer just a theory. It's a reality that authorities are investigating more closely with each passing month. Take the Pioneer LNG, for example. This ship was sanctioned and made headlines this year as it embarked on a 4-month journey to evade U.S. sanctions carrying liquefied natural gas from Russia's Arctic LNG 2 facility. After an extended search for a buyer willing to risk violating U.S. sanctions, the Pioneer LNG finally docked in Russia's Far East in an area where it could offload its cargo without interference. This is a clear example of how Russia is using its shadow fleet to evade sanctions and keep its economy running and support its war in Ukraine, even when the rest of the world is trying to squeeze them out. The Pioneer LNG's ability to skirt regulations for months demonstrates just how difficult it's going to be to stop this network once it's in motion. And it highlights the growing sophistication of the shadow fleet. So what does all this mean? The shadow fleet isn't just about oil smuggling. It's about economic warfare, espionage, and sabotage, a covert war being waged beneath the waves. These ships are not only bypassing sanctions and moving millions of barrels of oil, they're disrupting global supply chains, creating a security risk, and potentially cutting off vital energy sources at a moment's notice. The international community has to wake up to the seriousness of this situation. There's no simple fix. Surveillance has to be stepped up. Nations need to work together to track and intercept these vessels. And legal frameworks have to evolve to deal with the growing threat. So what are we going to do about it? We need to fight back by using better surveillance tools, leveraging satellite data, artificial intelligence, and global intelligence sharing need to stay one step ahead of the shadow fleet. We need international cooperation between countries that need to unite to enforce sanctions, clamp down on the use of flags of convenience, and target the shell companies that facilitate these illicit operations. And perhaps more importantly, we need to recognize the urgency of this threat before it's too late. The shadow fleet represents an ongoing and growing threat to global stability. It's not just an economic issue, it's a security issue. And we need to take action now before it's too late. Well, thanks for watching the Hot Zone. Make sure to subscribe and share this video to stay one step ahead, and stay tuned for more updates as we continue to monitor this and other growing threats. So until next time, stay alert, stay informed, and remember, the game has changed and the stakes have never been higher.